All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our latest webinar on alcohol, marijuana, and drugs, oh my, from UAB's Office of Parent and Family Services. And with what we brought in, Christina Canfield, our Substance Abuse Prevention and Recovery Coordinator here on campus. She and I have been working together very closely over the past couple of months for a variety of different topics and issues related for our family members to help them start to begin and create better opportunities for communication related to these critical topics, especially as our students are starting off on these first 6 weeks into the college semester and what that impact can really look like for our students. So today she's going to share with you some tips and information, resources, ways that you can have conversations with your students, things to be on the lookout for, and many other things. And so please feel free to type in any questions or concerns that you may have throughout the presentation. We'll happily answer them. For those of you that are part of our Facebook live stream, please go ahead and feel free to type in anything into the Facebook comments, and we will also help answer any of those questions as well. So I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it over. I will say before I do turn it over to Christina, please, if you do type in any questions, please make sure that you are respectful of your students' personal identification information. Do not put full names, Blazer ID information, or other things, but we are happy to answer questions in general in any way that we can. So before I'm going to go ahead and switch everything over and give this over to Christina to go ahead and share with you all of her information. So if you will give us just a second for everything to switch over, then we should be ready to go for today.
Thanks so much, Meredith. We are working on sharing my screen so that you'll be able to see all of my information with everyone. Y'all let me know when we're ready. Okay, well, welcome again, everyone, to Alcohol, Marijuana, and Drugs. Oh my, that was the title that first came to my brain. We were trying to decide how we wanted to approach this topic with parents. Just a brief introduction. My name, again, is Christina Canfield. You see my contact information on the screen. I am the current Substance Abuse Prevention and Recovery Coordinator here at UAB. I've only been here since April, but I absolutely love it. I am proud to be a Blazer and proud to be part of this community. There are a couple of different aspects to my job. One of them is really overseeing the intentional coordination of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug education for our students here at UAB. And I also oversee our collegiate recovery community for our students in recovery from substance use disorders. So we're going to talk about that as well today, and you'll learn more about that. If you're having trouble seeing my email, I know it's in like a weird green on my PowerPoint. It's kmc211@uab.edu. Please never hesitate to reach out to me to ask any questions, especially if it's something we don't get to during the webinar today. Okay. And excuse me, I'm still getting over a cold. I have a toddler and I work at a college, so sometimes it feels like I live in a petri dish. And one other thing I want to say about myself as we go into this is I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is that I've been clean and sober since February 11th, 2005, so a little over 13 years now. And that really plays into how passionate I am about my job because I was in college when I found myself struggling with a substance use disorder. So I'm always very open and honest about that. So are my parents. Hopefully they'll tune in as well. They usually follow what I do today. So let's talk a little bit about national trends for college students when it comes to alcohol, marijuana, and other drugs. We kind of know, right, that alcohol is widely used on college campuses. And I think what's always really interesting to me is when we compare college students to their peers who are not in college. So same age, but non-college peers. And college students tend to drink heavier than their non-college peers. Binge drinking within the past 2 weeks nationally, it's about 32.4% of college students, or drunk anytime in the last month is about 40.8%. We've been doing a lot of work since the 1980s all across the nation on these numbers, and we're doing a good job. But society being what it is, and we're going to talk a little bit in just a second about the mixed messages we send our students and why these numbers still stay fairly high across the country. Marijuana use is really at an all-time high for college students. Interestingly, opposite of alcohol, the marijuana use for non-college peers is higher than college peers, but our college students are using marijuana at rates we've never seen before, topping out at almost 5% in 2016. I have a lot of ideas about this, and something we've been talking about on a national level is there's a changing landscape when it comes to marijuana in our country right now. There are states that have changing laws. It's a national conversation. And so I think we're going to see these numbers continue to rise for a while, but that just means we need to do more education. We need to be talking about it in ways other than it's illegal, don't do it, because it's not necessarily a healthy or productive conversation with young people. We have to start approaching these things from a harm reduction standpoint instead of, if you do it, you're going to be in trouble or something like that, you know. I had a parent actually call me during the end of the spring semester. I was in my second week on the job, and she asked me if I knew that there was an issue with students using Adderall and Ritalin, excuse me, on campus. And, you know, I let her know that actually, yes, we do know that nationally that is an issue among college students, misusing prescription Ritalin and Adderall. A lot of times you'll hear them referred to as study drugs. The thing about that is people think that they're helping them study, or they think that they're helping them achieve better results, and there really is no proof that that's happening. And there's really no like long-term success from it as well. So students who are misusing Ritalin and Adderall, particularly during those high stress times, finals, exams, midterms, things like that, we know that those numbers are rising. They are also rising here at UAB, and I'm going to show you some data about that. And so I think it's important we talk to our students about this. It's important that parents talk to their students about this. And we are really, really, really going to talk about the role that parents and families play in helping us educate your students. And there's some more statistics on the screen just about unintentional alcohol-related injuries and deaths. I want to pay particular attention to motor vehicle crashes, and the amount of students we lose to those nationwide. These are national numbers. And because we're going to talk a little bit now about UAB, and that number really becomes very important. So this is data we've actually compiled since 2014. It's UAB specific. So we send out a survey to our students and they respond. So these are self-reported numbers from our students. And the thing I really want to draw your attention to is any driving after drinking. This is a number that is almost 4 times the national rate. So students across the nation self-report drinking and driving at about 10%. UAB students are reporting this between 35 and 40%. This number has gone down slightly in 2017, but it still stays right around 35%. As a matter of fact, we have an intern this semester who's going to be working with us to really get into questions that we have about this. Why? Why are our students drinking and driving? What are the issues that are underlying this, so that we can do some better programming and really reach our students and hopefully change that behavior on our campus. We know that other campuses offer things like safe rides, kind of like Uber, but for a campus and free for students. And so we're really going to be looking at what can UAB do. The one thing you can do right now is talk to your student about drinking and driving. There's a great campaign, Buzz Driving is Drunk Driving. Any amount of drinking and then driving is dangerous and slows your response rate. You can see our used, it says RX drugs, that means prescription drugs not prescribed to them. We are working on breaking those numbers down to look at how much of that is study drugs versus other drugs. But those rates are also fairly high compared to the national standards. And then of course the used marijuana in the past 30 days is 2 to 3 times higher than the national numbers. And these are so important because when I got to UAB, the message I really received was not our students. Our students do not use substances. They don't drink. And what's really dangerous about that message is if we really truly believe that, then we're not educating them on the things we need to be educating them on. We're not talking about the things we need to be talking about to help change the environment. If we live in denial, we're really just denying ourselves a solution. And so when we address issues head on, we talk about them, we educate, and we provide good prevention and good solid intervention, we're actually getting into a solution instead of just denying the problem. So it's not a negative thing, it's a positive thing, because now that we know the issues and we can start to understand the issues, we can start to change those issues. And just to give you a better idea of, this is data from our conduct office. We saw an over 100% increase in alcohol or other drug violations. That's what AOD stands for, among first-year students. So this is really, you can see the freshman, sophomore, and junior statistics here, but we're really focusing on freshmen or traditional first-year students, because 58% of them reported never having consumed alcohol before coming here, but then we're seeing this huge increase in violations. And I do want to point out that a change in policy saw an 8.4% increase of students living on campus since we started requiring them to, but that still does not really add up to this huge spike in violations. So we know we need to reach our first year students, and we know that we need parents' help to do it. Because if you see that 38% of those incoming students in 2017 reported that they had zero, none, zilch hours of alcohol or drug education in the 4 years prior to them coming here. So we can't necessarily depend on our schools to be doing it. We need all of us, the whole community, working to educate our students. And so I really want to talk about this, because we send this really crazy, dangerous, mixed message to students in our society. We know that almost a quarter of college students meet diagnostic criteria for a substance use disorder. What do I mean by that? Substance use disorder means some issue with drugs or alcohol that exists on a continuum. Either they are mildly struggling, moderately struggling, or it's time for some type of intervention because there's a severe substance use disorder. However, when surveyed several years ago, 37% of college students said they're afraid. They're afraid of the social stigma attached to having that label to them if they sought help for alcohol and drugs. And I think what even compounds that, so we're talking about this social stigma, 38% of college administrators across the country said this is just really hard to talk about. This is so hard to talk about because in our society, drinking or using or quote unquote partying in college is seen as a normal college rite of passage. However, 40% of student attrition cases, and when I say attrition, I mean dropout, fail out, or withdrawal, involve some type of substance misuse. So it's really hard to talk about. I get that. But the more we talk about it, the easier it becomes to talk about. And the more we chip away at that stigma, and the less students we're going to lose from college due to substance misuse. And we know that only 6% of those students ever seek help, and we need that number to go up. We need them to know that it's okay to seek help. And so you can see on the screen, I talk about this dangerous mixed message. I want you to really think to yourself about every movie you've ever seen about college. Every movie you've ever watched about college. When I was in college, it was Road Trip, National Lampoon's Van Wilder. A lot of times I make those references to students today and they have no idea what I'm talking about. So every movie I've ever seen about college sends the same message, that this is a time to experiment and have fun. This is the time to party. But we're also telling people you're too young to have a substance use disorder. How can you have a problem with alcohol and drugs if you're only 18 to 24 years old? And we also tell them it's time to grow up and decide what you want to do for the rest of your life. And you better make good grades because I'm paying for your education. So that's a really dangerous mixed message when we're telling people you're supposed to experiment and have fun. You better do this, but you're also too young to have a problem. We're really setting them up for failure in certain instances. So I really reflect on that a lot. What are the messages that we're sending our students? Are we having an open-ended conversation about alcohol and drug use and how that plays out in our society? You're not too young to have a problem, and we're really, really going to touch on that in just a second. So in 2016, something really amazing happened. The Surgeon General released the Surgeon General's report, Facing Addiction in America. It was really the first time that our federal government has stepped out and said, you know what? Just Say No was not a great campaign. It may have helped some people, but overall it was not very successful. That we really have to treat addiction or substance use disorder as a public health issue, and it's become the public health issue of our time. If you watch the news, if you read the news, then I'm sure that you're hearing a lot of the same things that I'm covering right now. But we know that 22.5 million people reported drug use in the past year in our country. That does not necessarily mean they have a substance use disorder, but we do know that 20.8 million of those people do have a substance use disorder, either mild, moderate, or severe. And I put off to the side that there are 19 million people who report prescription drug misuse, because that is a hot topic on college campuses. And over 197 people die every day from drug overdose. That is actually the new statistic from 2017. I really want to pull up a map just to really drive this home. I think this is so important because we always say, not my state, not my county, not my town, not my child, not my student, until it is all of a sudden our state, our county, our town, our college, our student. I highly doubt my parents sent me off to college thinking that I was going to be that student, and I was. And so I really want to show you, I'm a very visual learner. So this is a map of every county in the United States, and this is drug overdose deaths per 100,000 people in every county from 1999 to 2014. Now this is 4-year-old data on this map. And I want to be very clear about something. Since 2014, overdose rates have increased substantially. So I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but just last year it was 2016 was 175 people every day, and we jumped to 197. And so we've really gone up anywhere from 10 to 20% every year since 2014. So this map has gotten a lot darker in certain places. And I think the good news is certain areas of the country that were hardest hit early on are starting to see a leveling off. And it's time to really start paying attention to what those states and areas are doing to address this as a public health concern. But like I said, I really wanted to drive that point home because it is our state, it is our county, it's our town, and it's our students, and we need to educate them and protect them as best we can. And so I really wanted to touch on addiction, because when we're talking about alcohol and other drugs and prevention and education, this is a part of prevention and education, is really understanding how addiction works in the brain. We could talk about this for hours. I'm just going to do a really brief overview. If you are extremely interested in this topic, you can grab a cup of coffee with me. You could even take a class on this topic, and I encourage you to do that. So when a person uses a substance, and that could be alcohol or drugs, and many times I'll talk about alcohol as a drug. Alcohol is a drug. It is a mood mind-altering substance. So when a person uses a substance, either binge or they get intoxicated, so they get high, right? They have that feel-good high. Then eventually they have to come down. And I tell students all the time, you do have to come down. It doesn't last forever. And usually there's some type of negative affect. So after drinking too much, there would be a hangover most times in the morning. Or any other drugs would have other negative affects after you're done. We know things like ecstasy or MDMA deplete serotonin levels in your brain, so people may feel slightly down or depressed for several days. And so there are different things that happen after a person uses. And then there's usually some preoccupation or anticipation. It's not all bad. I was actually talking to my intern about that this morning. If it wasn't fun at all, I wouldn't have continued to do it. So there was some sort of positive thing. There was some type of reward my brain received from using a substance, whether that was the ability to socialize better or feel less self-conscious about things, or just to feel like I fit in. There was some type of reward my brain was getting. The difference between me and my peers when I was in college that I can look back on now and notice is that on Sunday night, my peers could stop and start studying for class the next day. And my preoccupation or anticipation, what never ended. It was like I needed that immediate next time. And now that I'm older, I've been clean and sober for 13 years, I can look back on that and I can really see that. But in the moment, it was hard to see. And the thing is, the more a person uses a substance, this cycle intensifies, leading to greater harm, and it actually progressively changes the structure of our brain. So let me break this down. This is my favorite metaphor. I tell people all the time, I want you to imagine that your brain is a perfect untouched meadow. It's just gorgeous. But you really need to get to the other side of that meadow because you're running late for class. And so one day you just decide, I'm going to cut across this meadow to get to the other side so I get to class on time. And you do. And you're like, man, that felt kind of good. I got to class on time. Okay. And you go about your day and you're really thinking, I might do that again tomorrow. And so the next morning you wake up, you're running late for class, and you approach this meadow and you're like, man, that felt pretty good yesterday. I'm going to cut across again. And so I cut across the meadow and I get to class on time. And I repeat this every single day until one day I don't think about it anymore. I just walk across the meadow. And by this point, I've actually beaten a path in the meadow where you can actually see where I've crossed it every single day. That's a neuroadaptation. Think about it. How many times you drive home from work or school or wherever, and you're just in your head, you're thinking about the day, what you're going to make for dinner, the dishes need to be done, the laundry needs to be done, all those things we think about. And before we know it, we're in our driveway. And we're like, man, how'd we get here? Those are neuroadaptations. Our brain really adapts to things magnificently. And that's how addiction works. Eventually, there's some reward I get for crossing that meadow, for using that substance. And over time, I beat a path, and I've trained my brain to walk across the meadow without even thinking. It's really not about feeling good anymore. It's just about getting to class on time. And so I love this quote from the Surgeon General's report. As use becomes ingrained behavior, impulsivity shifts to compulsivity. Compulsion literally means without choice. And the primary drivers shift from positive reinforcement or feeling good to negative reinforcement or just feeling better. So eventually it's really not about feeling good anymore. It's just not about feeling bad. I don't want to be late for class. So I use that metaphor a lot, and it's made a lot of sense to a lot of people. And so I thought this was a really good time to just sort of point out some signs, some symptoms that you may notice in your student if they're misusing substances. And I really wanted to put this in there because I started thinking about my parents. I have a really great relationship with my parents. And like I said, they sent me off to college. You know, probably not even think. I was a straight A student in high school. I had scholarships. I was super involved in so many clubs and different things. And I think this really, my substance use disorder really blindsided my parents, my whole family. But I believe that there were some signs and symptoms that I hope when my daughter's older, I'll pay attention to now that I just know more about what to look for. Failing grades is the first big red flag. That first semester when I came home with C's and other barely passing grades from being a straight A student in high school was like, whoa, what is happening to my straight A high school student? Now that could be just people trying to adjust to college, right? It's different. They have some more freedom. They're trying to find a new balance. They're meeting new people. They're just adjusting and developing as young adults. But it is a big red flag. Skipping classes is indicative of a shift in priorities. Sleeping during the day, that might depend on your student. I'm a sleepy person. Even before drug use, I would just sleep during the day. So know your student, know their normal behavior patterns. If they're not a person who normally sleeps all day and all of a sudden they are, that could be a red flag. Unexplained financial difficulty. We know that college students struggle with money. I think that's just become part of our narrative as Americans, especially people in higher education. However, be aware of what your student is spending money on. If it's continuous and they never have cash, they never have money, they're always asking for money, that could indicate an issue. Things like sudden mood swings, questionable hygiene and appearance for a person who has not struggled with that previously. Mixing drugs is so important to talk to our students about. If a student is prescribed a medication, and this could even be an antibiotic. It doesn't even have to be they're prescribed any type of opioid or benzodiazepine. It could just be they're prescribed an antibiotic. They need to know there are certain drugs that if you use alcohol with, it could be very dangerous. That's anything, like I said, from antibiotics to things like maybe they have a pain medicine if they got injured recently, or if they have been prescribed some type of anti-anxiety medication. We have to talk about mixing drugs with our students. That could be a lethal combination. Family history. I cannot stress this enough. I was a person who grew up in an environment where we just didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about the family history of substance use disorders. And what we know is that addiction is 60 to 70% genetic or biological. There are amazing researchers out there doing tons of research to map certain genome sequences and to really try to identify what is it biologically or genetically in addicts that changes things. And so we have to talk about our family history. It wasn't until after I got clean and sober that suddenly I started hearing all of these stories about, and family history. And I was like, wouldn't this have been good information to have prior to picking up the substance? And so I teach people that all the time. Know your family history to the best of your ability. And if you don't know your family history, maybe they've been adopted or other issues that students may not know their family history, or you may not know your family history, always err on the side of caution. A person with a history of substance use disorder in their family is much more likely to develop a substance use disorder themselves. I have a daughter, she'll be 3 on Sunday, and my husband is also a person in recovery, and we talk about this. We are doing prevention at the young age of 3, and as she grows up, I hope we continue to have very open conversations about our family history, about her likelihood, and about the things she can do to make herself safe should she choose to use drugs and alcohol later in life. If your student is showing lack of motivation, that's a red flag. But really, if you can't get in contact with your student, you need to let the school know. You can call UAPD, you can reach out to our administrative team. You need to let us know if you have not been able to make contact with your student. That is a really dangerous red flag. And so I want you to know, addiction, substance use disorder, it's not an inevitable consequence of drug use. Not everyone who drinks a beer or smokes a joint or tries something suddenly develops a substance use disorder. There are a lot of factors at play. There are psychological factors unique to each individual. We talked about genetic and biological factors, and that's why it's so important to have that tough conversation about family history. Environmental factors, peer groups, geographic location, culture, finances, the sheer availability of drugs where you are, all of those things play a role. But I really want to talk about age of first use. Remember in the beginning when I said we send that message, you're too young to have a problem? That's a blatant lie, and we have to talk about it. Our brains are not fully developed until around the age of 25. The last part of our brain to fully form is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is largely responsible for decision making. That's why when we're teenagers, we just don't make consistent good decisions. And I always joke with students about, remember that person you decided to date, or these things you decided to do in high school, and you're like, oh man, that probably wasn't the smartest thing. That's because we're just really not good at weighing out pros and cons and potential consequences really prior to the age of 25. So the opposite is actually what's true. The younger we are when we first begin to use substances, the more likely we are to develop substance use disorders because our brains are simply not formulated. They're not formed all the way. And so we're putting ourselves at higher risk. We're creating those neuroadaptations on a brain that hasn't even had the chance to finish forming and growing and just being those big, beautiful brains that we love. And these next 2 slides are really just charts from the Surgeon General's report to show you some risk factors that we talked about, things like peer substance use, family conflict, favorable parental attitudes, family history, even in community, what's the cost of things like alcohol? How does the media portray it? Community, there's so many different factors that put people at higher risk. And then there are things that protect them. So things like self-efficacy, spirituality, resilience, that's something we are really working to teach our students about. Our counseling center has an excellent program on building resilience in our students today. If you are a more resilient person and you're able to cope with stress that life just sort of throws at you because life happens, you're less likely to use substances as a negative coping strategy. And so I just wanted to give you an idea of what a really good substance use continuum of care looks like, because we know that UAB is working to ensure that we offer an entire continuum of care for our students, all the way from prevention to recovery. So ideally, a good continuum of care has primary prevention, early intervention, treatment, and recovery support. And ever since I came to UAB, I've been so impressed. They created my position, and that really gave us a full continuum of care, which is very unique compared to other institutions around the country. We offer primary prevention through my office in UAB Wellness Promotion. We do alcohol and other drug education and prevention all across campus. We do interpersonal violence education and prevention. We have a whole group of peer educators called the Promoters of Wellness, and they do peer education with their students as well on these topics. And there's some contact information as well as our website. So we're really doing good primary prevention, and we're adding to our repertoire every single year, and we're getting out there and doing more and more. We offer early intervention through counseling services. Students can make an appointment, and we have some different online tools as well where students can do a screening to really look at their current riskier behaviors and how at risk they are for developing a substance use disorder. And even student conduct can do some early intervention. So we have, if a student gets in trouble for a conduct violation and they end up in student conduct, they're going to receive some early intervention there as well. This is what really makes UAB amazing and unique. Among so many other things, we actually have treatment on campus, which is very rare. We're very blessed to have UAB medicine as part of our broader institution. So we have the UAB Addiction Recovery Program, which offers outpatient treatment, inpatient treatment, and what I really want you to know about, there's free family support groups. I really encourage you to go to their website and check out the services they have to offer. And if at any point someone you know in your life may need that, or your student may need that, know that it's a resource here. And then of course we have recovery support through our UAB Collegiate Recovery Community. We're going to talk about that really quick. So it's collegiate recovery communities they're not a really new idea. They've been around for over 30 years, the oldest being at Texas Tech and Rutgers universities. We started ours a little over 3 years ago. Collegiate recovery is really the heart and soul, my passion, a part of my job. I love doing prevention education, but when it comes to talking about recovery, I always tell people I hope everybody finds a job where they feel like I feel when I talk about collegiate recovery communities. We have this beautiful opportunity to provide ongoing support post-treatment. We help our students navigate systems of care, to stay engaged in the recovery process by providing social support. And it's so important. I was 21 years old when I entered recovery, and I tried to return to school. And my university was my biggest trigger to my addiction. Everyone I used with was there. That campus in and of itself, I had used substances everywhere, and it was very difficult to stay clean and sober. It was very difficult to maintain recovery, and I didn't make it. I dropped out and returned to using, and it wasn't until I re-entered recovery and a year later decided to return to school, and I graduated. And in that process, I discovered collegiate recovery communities and found that that was really what I had needed all along to help me maintain recovery and give me that support system on campus, because college is truly one of the most hostile environments for a young person who's trying to abstain from alcohol and other drugs. And so we really give them a space to grow and recover. We have our recovery support meetings every Tuesday at 7 p.m. We have 12-step support meetings on Thursdays and Saturdays. We do all kinds of social support and events. It's National Recovery Month in September, where we're really celebrating and honoring people in recovery. We're going to do a recovery comedy night on the 21st with a really famous recovery comedian. Sobertober is our big fall festival in October. So not only do we raise awareness across campus and in our community, but we offer a space for students to recover and feel like they're really welcome. And so I will say that in 2010, when we started the collegiate recovery community at Ohio University, which is my alma mater, that was something like the 12th or 15th collegiate recovery community in the nation, and now we're approaching 200 different communities around the country, and UAB is really a part of this movement, and that is just exciting. And it means that our students can come back to us and feel safe. And so this is where, this is what I really want to drive home for everyone watching this, is there is a national call to action in the Surgeon General's report for different people and entities. So there's a national call to action to medical providers, and there's a national call to action to educators, but there's a national call to action to individuals and families. You are a part of the solution. In my world, we talk about you can be a part of the problem or you can be a part of the solution. And I believe that our Blazer parents want to be a part of the solution, and this is what we need you to do. Please help your student reach out if you think they have a problem. And if you think you have a problem, there's help. You can reach out. Breaking the silence is crucial. Sam Quinones, author of Dreamland, really writes in his book about one of the things he recognized as he traveled the country and talked to families about losing their children to drug overdose, was he really found that silence. It was silence of the families that helped this thing to spread from coast to coast. When we talk about it, we chip away at the stigma, and we also offer a space for the next family to say, you know what, us too, and seek help. One of the most powerful things my father ever told me was when he finally broke his silence in his church group about his daughter being a person in recovery. One Sunday, they were doing, they do different topics every Sunday. And so one Sunday they were talking about addiction, and no one in his church class would stand up and wanted to talk about this. And he broke his silence. Him and my stepmother broke their silence for the first time and said, you know what? Our daughter is a recovering person, and she got clean at 21, and this is our story. And it was really hard for him. But what he did in that moment was he gave permission to the other people in that room to also speak up and seek help. And it happened. Slowly, his church members started calling him and saying, my child, my brother, my sister, my father, my mother, how can we get help? That was really powerful. You never know whose life you're going to change just by being open. Be supportive and not judgmental if your loved one has a problem. I always tell people substance use disorders are not moral failings. They're a disease. We talked about how it works in the brain. It's very difficult to achieve long-lasting recovery. Trust me, my last 2 years of recovery were very hard won. And that's even with, 13 years clean at this time. We can be compassionate and caring while also holding a person accountable. We can help people understand their behavior in light of a medical illness, and we can offer love and support while also maintaining healthy boundaries for ourselves. We need to show support for people in recovery, right? Because that gives all of us a chance to really speak up and advocate. We can be kind, and we can encourage others to seek out treatment when they need it. We can all support each other. I can remember 13 years ago being told, you don't talk about it. And over the last really 4 or 5 years, that's really started to change because we understand that our silence has really led to the death of so many people. I always say that the only requirement for a person to find long-term recovery is they have to be alive. They have to be alive. Advocate for changes in your community, but most importantly, please talk to your children about alcohol and drugs. I know this is hard. I know this is terrifying, and we think our kids aren't listening to us. But believe it or not, they hear more than we think. It's not easy, but it's crucial. Take this information. Take informed things. And that's what's so important. Use reliable sources. A lot of times we think we know certain information, but we're just going off of sort of what society has told us instead of actually having reliable information. Know what substances your students being exposed to. Talk about substance use disorders. Talk openly about risk. Talk openly about family history. It's the only way we're really going to change this. Be a good listener. Set clear expectations. And I'm going to say it, I know it's hard, is telling our children, don't do it or I'll kill you, or don't do it or I'll, some crazy consequence we can't really hold up to, is not effective communication. We have to talk about real consequences for not following family expectations. We have to talk about real consequences of drug use, not just the old, you better not do it. Help your child learn how to deal with peer pressure. Better yet, help them with resiliency. Get to know your child's friends, their parents. I know that's harder when they're in college, but it can be done. Talk to them often. If you still have young children who aren't in college yet, talk to them now. I told you, I'm doing prevention with my almost 3-year-old. And please support your school's efforts to implement evidence-based prevention interventions and treatment and recovery support. We need your support here at UAB to keep these programs going. And we're always here to work with our families. Something that Meredith and I are working on along with student conduct is we're really launching a whole series of things to support our Blazer parents, our Blazer families, for how to do this come spring of 2019, we're going to be publishing and distributing a booklet that really talks about these things, how to talk to your kid about alcohol and drugs, how to talk to your student, and different tips and things. So be on the lookout for that. We're hosting these webinars, and we're always open for you to come and talk to as well. And I think, yeah, those are just my references there in case you ever want to look things up. So were there any questions, y'all?
I want to go ahead and open it up for our family members to who are participating either via the webinar or Facebook Live to share any questions that you might have with us. We are definitely have some time to be able to answer those questions for you. As you are thinking of potentially typing in those questions, comments, or anything along those lines, I do also want to share, as Christina was just mentioning, we are working on creating this handbook for our family members right now. This will specifically start to be distributed late spring, early summer of next year. So we're gathering our information and data now, both from our students as well, though, from our family members. And so for our family members of first-year students who are participating or hearing this particular webinar, there is a survey that is out there to our family members. You may have actually even just gotten a reminder today about that survey that is out there. We want to know a lot of different information from you as a family. Some of it is just how often do you communicate with your student? How do you communicate? What type of communication services are you looking for from the Offices of Parent and Family Services, and then much more, as well as talk just a little bit about the types of conversations you've had with your student related to things like alcohol and other drugs, some other issues and concerns that we know our first-year students face. But that is really great information that we need to know, and we want to hear from you and be able to provide your input and feedback. Is that information that we will use within our the publications and everything that Christina was mentioning as we move forward. You also, as a benefit to you, by completing the survey, have the opportunity to win one of two $50 drawings that we'll be doing to be adding money to your students' Blazer Bucks account. So I know your students are already on campus and starting to eat and utilize all of our systems, so we want to give you another opportunity to kind of help pad that budget a little bit more. So again, by completing that particular webinar, that particular survey, it will get you entered to win for your student an additional $50 worth of Blazer Bucks.
And also, really quick, I wanted to show everyone, we have a brand new policy that we're working on, drug and alcohol policy for UAB, for all faculty, staff, students. And I wanted to just point you to the Wellness Promotion website. So if you go to uab.edu/students/wellness, and then you click on policies and resources. This is part of the Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act, and so we are, required by federal mandate to have these things published, different resources, and our policies on campus regarding drug and alcohol use. So please feel free to visit this website. We have a brand new policy that is almost at the very end of being approved, and as soon as that goes through, it will be published to this website. You can also read our biennial review regarding the Drug-Free Schools Act as well on that webpage. And so I really wanted to point that out for parents because that way you know exactly where to go for certain conduct questions and different policy questions you may have regarding alcohol and other drugs on the UAB campus.
Last chance for any questions that may pop in. If you are watching this later, post the live event, and you're watching this through either our university website page or through our Facebook page, please note that if you do have any questions or concerns, that you please reach out to the Office of Parent and Family Services or Christina. Her email address is there, again, back up on the screen again as we speak. But we are here to help in any way that we can related to you, your students' experience, and making sure that it is a successful and positive one for all of our students. So again, if there's no additional questions, we're going to go ahead and conclude today's webinar, but please reach out to us if there's anything that we can do for you, and we look forward to the continuation of a great semester, and we will chat with you all soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.